What's going on, guys? It's me, Troy, and I'm here again with another video. And I'm here to say thanks to everybody who recently commented, liked, and subscribed. I got my zip-up red hoodie on because we're gonna get cozy, talking about cozy mysteries. And not because it's 55 degrees outside and I don't really need it. But anyway, today we're talking about cozy mysteries, and I wanted to share 3 cozy mysteries that I've recently been either introduced to or recently just read the first book in the series of. And these are mysteries series that I'm hoping to read more of. They're really popular, and I'm mainly making this video to kind of communicate or have a combo with those who have read these particular authors and either love these characters or don't. I love hearing both sides of the whole story, you hear me? But first, as it regards cozy mysteries, I think that this particular subgenre is probably the most popular when it comes to those on the BT. I think a lot of people love the cozy mysteries. Cozies, as per mystery conventions, they are generally lighter in tone. They have funner elements. The elements, they're much more fun as it regards, their tellings, eccentric, whimsical. Authors can play a lot with cozy mysteries. The sex and violence is often done off stage, and they generally take place in a small community. But with that aside, one of the most attractive elements in the cozy mysteries is really just the main protagonist. With the cozy mystery, author always has to kind of work with a hook. So the main protagonist is probably a yoga instructor. Okay, so these are mysteries that revolve around the subject of yoga. That's the hook. Donut shop owner. These are mysteries that takes place around a donut shop. That's the hook. Librarian. These are books and mysteries that take place around a librarian's lifestyle. So you get that lifestyle, you get the mystery, and then you get the protagonist. And that is the thing that is kind of like the attraction and the draw, and what makes me draw back from particular cozy mysteries. It boils down to how well the author is relaying their protagonist. I think that with cozy mysteries, there's always this fine balance that I find where an author is trying to make their main protagonist both likable and relatable. And sometimes both of those two elements can move too much further into the element of silliness, if you will. That is one of the things that kind of gets on my nerves when it comes to mysteries, with cozy mysteries. I've always said this before, but I cannot stand the daffy donut shop owner girl stuck in a love triangle between her high school sweetheart and the town police officer. That kind of silliness, they can lean too far into that. And then in terms of the author, I think that that's what they consider to make their character likable and relatable, when in all actuality, for me, it's not. It makes the character silly. So that is one of the things that I feel like authors have to, for me personally, like, it really makes me disconnect from a mystery, a cozy mystery, when the author is trying to make their character too likable and too relatable to the point where they're just illogical in their detective skills and silly in general. But that aside, I'm going to share the 3.5 cozy mysteries that I've recently read that I absolutely adore and cannot wait to read much more of, because what I just spoke of didn't happen. The author knew how to really write their characters. So the first book that I want to share is Cruel World by Monica Ferris, that I read in December. This is a collection of the first 3 books in the series. I read the first book individually, and then I bought this because by the 3rd book I know whether or not I want to commit to the series. But per my reading of the first book, I think it's probably a good go. We'll see what happens. Alright. But Cruel World introduces us to our main amateur sleuth, Betsy Devonshire. At the beginning of the book, she's going through, it's not really an acrimonious kind of situation, but she's going through a divorce that has left her financially in the cold, basically. As a woman, I think she's in her late 30s or early 40s, but she's in that vulnerable position where she has to reclaim her identity, reclaim her life, and really start to make some much more positive decisions related to, where does she wants to take her future. So she basically is in a situation where she has to pull herself by the bootstraps. So being out in the cold, both physically, emotionally, and probably mentally, she is invited to this small town called Excelsior, where her sister Margaret owns a needlework shop. Now, Margaret invites Betsy to live in her apartment. Margaret invites Betsy to work in the shop. Betsy has very little, experience with needlework, but she takes on the job. This is an opportunity for her to get back on her feet and to reclaim her womanhood, okay, if you will. But unfortunately, Margaret is murdered inside of her own needlework shop. And per her lawyer, per Margaret's uh, will, and Betsy inherits the needlework shop as well as Margaret's apartment. And Betsy is not really the kind of character who is known to commit to things. So, her first kind of instinct is that of fight or fly. But mostly she's leaning toward the fly spectrum of like, I can't do, she's telling herself, I can't do this. But the people in the community, they loved and adored Margaret. They loved and adored the needlework shop. So they kind of rally around Betsy to, reinforce that she can do this. Please don't close this shop. We need this place. And in honor of Margaret, we have to figure out exactly who took Margaret out, who killed her. I love this particular book because, first of all, Betsy is a very flawed character and she has some issues, okay? She has some issues, and I love that juxtaposition, right? That's a good word. Between how steady and solid Margaret's character was, and how fluid and noodly, we'll leave it at that Betsy was. And how, because of Margaret's death, Betsy had to, transition over and try to, she really had to grasp herself and pull herself together because she is the one who ran across the body of her sister. So I want to see much more of what happens to Betsy as she grows as a character. But the number one thing, it's a cozy mystery, it's kind of status quo, right? Formulaic and that sort of thing. But the number one thing that I've loved about Wellllll that Ferris did is she took us, well, first of all, I cared about Margaret. How she described Margaret's murder, or the scene, how Margaret's skirt was lifted up and how her hands, I really keep remembering this, how Margaret's hands were clenched at her side. It gave me chills. It gave me chills. But that aside, what Ferris did that I love so much about this book is she took Betsy through the grieving process of Margaret's murder. And it's very rare indeed where I really am invested and care about what happened to the victim. That is why I really decided that I was going to continue reading this series. I was kind of mad at the same time. I was really sad about what happened. Listen, I'm about to cry or nothing, but I was really sad about what happened to Margaret, and that's what made me say, okay, I'm liking this book. So the first book in the mystery series that I loved was Them Bones by Carolyn Haynes. I read this in December. The subtitle is A Mystery from the Mississippi Delta, so it takes place in the South, of course. But let me tell you, this was one of those books where I could not put it down. Okay, I couldn't put it down. This is okay, so let's get into what it's about first. It follows the story of a Southern woman named Sarah Booth. Sarah Booth resides in this plantation house. We're not going to read into that. It's a lot to read into, but we're not going to do that today. She resides in this plantation house that's been in her family for ages. It's on the verge of being taken over because she's having financial difficulties. On top of that, she doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have a job really. She doesn't follow a lot of the Southern traditions as a Southern belle, coming from a family that once had a lot of wealth. And she's just kind of on the outskirts of the whole community. But even on top of that, in her house, there's a ghost that she casually, so nonchalantly communicates with. And when I was reading it, it kind of took me by surprise because it was like, it was that casual, that nonchalantly, that there was a ghost in her house that Sarah communicates with. You know what I'm saying? There was no explanation. There was no disclaimer to it all. It's just that this is a ghost in her house that she communicates with. Threw me for a loop. That's another example of whimsical. But at the same time, I accepted it. As a reader, I accepted it right away. Now, the issue at hand that Sarah has to face as, a cozy mystery is that this man named Hamilton Garrett is being released from prison. His family is known for, they have like their own little farmland, plantation, I want to say, that's been in their family for years, further down the road. But on that particular property, there was a murder involving Hamilton Garrett's mother. He was the one who was convicted of that murder. But people in the community, more specifically that of Sarah's best friend, don't believe that Hamilton had anything to do with it. Nonetheless, he's still ostracized as he returns home. Sarah is tapped on her shoulder by her best friend to look into exactly what happened about 20 years ago involving the murder of Hamilton's mother. That way that they can clear Hamilton's name, and then he can be much more accepted within the community, although he really ain't looking to be worried about that. Sarah, of course, she goes about because she has a lot of free time on her hands and she needs money to save her particular home. Sarah then involves herself as a private investigator into uncovering what happens, and this leads to a lot of dangerous situations as someone does not want Sarah to uncover the truth of what happened to Hamilton Garrett's mother. Anyway, girl, yes, I got the second book in this series, but this couldn't put it down. Could not put it down. It was so, it just sucked me right in. Okay guys, for the last cozy mystery series that I've recently read and enjoyed and hope to read more of, I am sharing probably the most popular one on this little mini list that I have going on here, and that is the Laurel Child's Laurel Child's Tea Shop mystery series. This right here contains the first 3 books. I read Death by, is it Darjeeling? Individually last summer, and then just recently in December I read Gunpowder Green, which is the second book. And so I went ahead and bought this little collection here so that, of course, about the 3rd book I know whether or not I'm committed or not. Now, you know, Laurel Childs is super popular for her Tea Shop series, and I only picked her up because, well, just like a small background, those who know me know that I am in love with Susan Whittaker's China Belle series. Yeah, like all the way, China Bells. And China Bells is, the hook to the China Belle series is that China is an herb shop owner. So, having been so caught up with this series, you know, I was sort of feeling like dehydrated of my China fulfillment, you know, for my reading of China, I was dehydrated. So I started to move on into reading Laura Childs and her particular series for my saturation, alright? For my hydration and saturation for cozy mysteries. And her particular hook is that of a tea shop. Now, because I read the first 2 books, I'm not going to go into, you know, the synopsis of each individual one. I have to do both of them, and we're not going to do that. So, for just like an overview as to why I am liking this series or planning to continue forward with this series is that, well, I am, you know, not to make comparisons, but Laura Childs' main protagonist is Theodosia Browning, and short for Theo. While I did pick up this series to fulfill some of our urgings for a new China book, I have to say that, you know, for the most part, Theodosia is a winning amateur sleuth character for me. And the thing about her is that she isn't, to me, as remarkable as China. She isn't as totally remarkable or witty or charismatic even. You know, China just has a way about her that I just love. But at the same time, those were the characteristics about Theodosia that I did like, that made me want to continue to read the series. It's because she is a little bit more reserved than China. She's a lot quieter than China, and she's a lot gentler in her approach. Not to say that China's a brute, but their personalities are really kind of, to me, having read both of them, they're opposite. But the thing that they do have in common is that they're both pragmatic and they're both dedicated to their individual businesses. So that made me like Theodosia Browning. I like the fact that she was the opposite of China in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, she's similar to China Bells. So I love how Childs writes her character, Theodosia Brown. You know, like I said earlier in the video, a lot of cozy mystery authors, they try to force their protagonists to be likable. They try to force them to be relatable. And as I said earlier, you know, that moves into the territory of them being very silly. I like the fact that Childs does not force Theodosia to be anything at all. Theodosia is simply who she is. And, you know, you can take it or leave it, right? Childs does a great job of balancing humor within her character, humor within the small town setting, and in each of the residents. without having it be silly. That is so important to me with this. Some authors can do it. Like I said, humor is really hard to do. To me, it's really kind of hard, tricky to do in mysteries. Some authors can do it and some can't, but I really like her. I really like Laura Childs' writing style with her characters. They really are, for the first two books that I read, they really do read like just some small sippings of tea. Alright guys, that is it. I would love for you guys to sound off in the comment section if you read any of these to let me know what do you love most about each of these particular series. I would love, that's the thing about being here is like I want to connect with people who what are your opinions? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you love the Monica Ferris series? Why do you love it? Do you love the Laura Child series? Why do you love it? Which I know a lot of you guys do. Do you love the Carolyn Haynes series? Why? And even if you don't love them or you read the first book or whatever book, what is it that you didn't like? What is it that didn't resonate and connect with you? I would love to know, and I'm excited to read more of these books in each of these three series. And with that out of the way, I'm going to see y'all later. Remember to love yourself and read the books that you want to read because this is about you. It always is. Peace.